Hey there, it's James. Picture this, a little brick house on a quiet street, the kind with a creaky porch swing and a mailbox that's seen better days. It's not much to look at, but it's mine, ours, I guess, since Lydia moved in after we tied the knot 3 years back. I built this life from scratch, hands dirty from years of hustling my construction business into something solid. No silver spoon here, just sweat, late nights, and a knack for turning blueprints into paychecks. By 32, I'd carved out a decent living, enough to keep the lights on and then some. But lately, that then some has been disappearing faster than I can earn it. Hello. Thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel to help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. It would be great if you can also comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Bob from Atlanta. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's dive into the details of today's story. See, I married Lydia, gorgeous Lydia with her auburn hair and eyes that could stop traffic. She's the kind of woman who walks into a room and owns it, no questions asked. I still remember the first time I saw her, laughing at some dive bar, her smile cutting through the smoke like a spotlight. Thought I'd hit the jackpot when she said yes to me, a regular guy with calloused hands and a pickup truck that rattles more than it roars. But love's funny, isn't it? You start out thinking it's enough, and then you realize it's a two-way street, and maybe you're the only one walking it. Lydia's got expensive tastes, and I don't mean the clearance rack. Designer bags, shoes with names I can't pronounce, dresses that cost more than my first forklift. I never minded much, kept my head down, worked harder, figured it's what you do when you love someone. But then there's her mom, Margaret. Oh, Margaret. She's a piece of work, 60 going on 16, with bleach blonde hair and a voice that could peel paint. She lives in this big, gaudy house 30 minutes out, all white columns and chandeliers, like she's auditioning for some reality show. Guess who's been footing the bill for that? Me. Mortgage, utilities, the works. They don't say thanks, though. Nah. I'm just the guy who keeps the gravy train rolling. Most days, I let it slide. I'd come home from a 10-hour shift, dust on my boots, and find Lydia scrolling through her phone, planning her next shopping spree. Margaret would call, dropping hints about needing new curtains or complaining the AC's too loud. A man like you should be grateful for my daughter, she'd say, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. Lydia'd just smile, that little half-smirk of hers, and change the subject. I'd grit my teeth, swallow it down. What's a few snide comments when you've got a family, right? But that night, man, that night was different. It was a Sunday, one of those humid evenings where the air sticks to your skin. I'd spent the day finishing a deck job, arms aching, sunburn creeping up my neck. Got home, showered quick, and threw on a clean shirt because Lydia wanted us over at Margaret's for dinner. Family time, she called it. I wasn't thrilled. Margaret's cooking's more for show than taste, but I went. Loaded up the truck with a six-pack and a tired grin, figuring I'd survive another round of their chatter. We sat around her polished oak table, candles flickering, the smell of overcooked roast hanging heavy. Margaret was in rare form, wine glass in hand, going on about some neighbor's new car. Lydia nodded along, picking at her plate, her gold earrings catching the light. I was half listening, sipping a beer, wondering how long till I could crash on my own couch. Then it happened. Out of nowhere, Margaret leaned across the table, her eyes glinting like she'd been waiting for this all night. Lydia, honey, she said, voice dripping with that fake sweetness she does so well. You're too beautiful to be married to this man. You deserve better. The words landed like a hammer on a nail. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Mashed potatoes stuck there like some sad little lump. I looked at Lydia, waiting for her to shut it down, to say something, anything. She didn't. She laughed. That light, airy laugh I used to love, like it was all a big joke. Don't worry, Mom, she said, waving a hand. He's only temporary. Temporary. The word hit me square in the chest, a sucker punch I didn't see coming. I sat there, beer bottles sweating in my grip, the room shrinking around me. Margaret smirked, sipping her wine. Lydia didn't even look my way, just went back to her plate like she'd commented on the weather. Temporary? 3 years of busting my ass, paying their bills, keeping their world spinning, and I'm temporary? My ears buzzed. The air felt thick, like I couldn't breathe it right. I pushed my chair back, the scrape loud against their fancy hardwood floor. They both looked up then, surprised, like I'd interrupted something. James, Lydia said, eyebrows raised, but I was already on my feet. I didn't say a word, couldn't find any worth saying. My boots thudded across the room, past the framed photos of their perfect little life I'd never fit into. I grabbed my keys off the counter, the jangle cutting through the silence. James, where are you going? Lydia called, her tone more annoyed than worried. Margaret muttered something I didn't catch, probably another jab. I didn't turn around. My hand hit the doorknob, cold and solid, and I yanked it open. The night air rushed in, humid but free. I stepped out, pulled the door shut behind me, and it clicked into place with a sound I'll never forget. That was it. No yelling, no big scene, just me in the dark, and a line I didn't know I'd crossed till I was on the other side. That night, I walked out of Margaret's house. I didn't go straight home. Couldn't. The truck's headlights cut through the dark as I drove nowhere in particular, just winding down back roads, the rumble of the engine drowning out the noise in my head. Temporary. That word kept bouncing around, sharp-edged, like a splinter I couldn't dig out. 3 years with Lydia, 3 years of pouring everything I had into her and her mom's world. And I'm temporary? I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white, feeling like a damn fool. I pulled into a gas station lot around midnight, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Sat there with the engine off, staring at the dashboard, and let it all sink in. I'd been running on fumes for a while, not just that night, but years. Nights I'd come home late, sawdust in my hair, after busting my back on some site to keep the checks coming. Lydia'd be half asleep on the couch, TV blaring, credit card statements piled up from her latest haul. I'd see her at parties too, back when I still tagged along laughing too loud, leaning into some guy's story while I nursed a beer in the corner. Didn't bother me much then. Figured she was just being Lydia, bright and alive. But now? Now I saw it different. She'd been clocking out of us long before I walked away. And Margaret, God, that woman. I'd get calls mid-job, her voice barking through the phone. The gutters need fixing, James, or the HOA fees went up again. Never a please, never a thanks, just demands, like I was her personal ATM. I'd stay up late sometimes, crunching numbers to cover their mortgage, their car payments, their whole damn life, while my own truck rattled on its last legs. Also, they could keep up their big, shiny lie. And what did I get? A smirk and a temporary. By the time the sun peeked over the horizon, I was done feeling sorry for myself. I drove home, our home, I guess, though it didn't feel like mine anymore. The little brick house looked smaller in the gray dawn, like it had shrunk under the weight of everything. I walked inside, boots heavy on the floor, and stood there in the living room. Lydia's stuff was everywhere, perfume bottles on the coffee table, a pair of heels kicked off by the door. It hit me hard. This wasn't a partnership. I'd been a sucker, propping up two people who'd never once looked at me like I mattered. So I cut it. All of it. Sat down with my laptop, coffee going cold, and started unraveling the mess. First, the joint accounts. Clicked a few buttons, locked her out. She'd wake up to a big fat zero next time she swiped that card. Then the mortgage on Margaret's place. I called the bank, told them I'm off the hook, let the payments lapse. They'd figure it out when the notices started piling up. Utilities, subscriptions, anything tied to me, gone. I didn't feel guilt, didn't feel cruel, just tired, like I'd been carrying a load too long and finally set it down. Lydia's name lit up my phone an hour later. I was packing a duffel bag, clothes, tools, a couple books, when it buzzed on the counter. James, what's going on? Her voice crackled through, confused, a little shrill. I stared at the screen, her picture flashing, that perfect smile I used to chase. My thumb hovered over answer, but I let it ring out. She called again, then texted. Where are you? Call me. I didn't. Blocked her number, then Margaret's too, their voices snuffed out like a candle in the wind. I grabbed my bag, locked the door behind me, and left. No note, no trace, just a ghost slipping out of their story. I crashed at a buddy's place for a few days, an old trailer on the edge of town. Needed space to breathe, figure out what's next. That's when Clara showed up. You know Clara? Lydia's best friend since they were kids, short brown hair, freckles, The kind of person who doesn't say much but sees everything. She'd always been around, quiet in the background, but I never paid her much mind till then. She knocked on the trailer door one afternoon, holding a paper bag, her beat-up sneakers scuffing the dirt. "Brought you some food," she said, handing me the bag. Smelled like fried chicken, still warm. I took it, surprised, and she just stood there, hands in her pockets, looking at me with those steady hazel eyes. "You okay?" she asked, soft but real, like she actually wanted the answer. I shrugged, leaning against the doorframe. "Been better," I said, voice rough from not talking much lately. "You heard." She nodded. "Lydia's freaking out. Says you disappeared." A pause, then, "I don't blame you." That caught me off guard. I looked at her, really looked, and saw something I hadn't before, warmth, not pity. She didn't push, didn't pry, just gave me this little half-smile and said, "Take care of yourself, James." Then she turned and walked off, her shadow stretching long in the afternoon sun. I stood there, chicken in hand, feeling something shift, like a crack letting light in after too long in the dark. That night, I ate alone, the trailer quiet except for the hum of the fridge. Thought about Clara, her words sticking with me. Thought about Lydia too, probably raging somewhere, and Margaret, cursing my name. But mostly, I thought about me, about taking my life back, piece by piece. I wasn't sure what came next, but for the first time in years, I felt like I could choose it. Not for them, not for anyone, just for me. And that was enough to keep going. A couple weeks after I walked out, I heard through the grapevine that Lydia didn't waste any time. Didn't expect her to, honestly. She's not the type to sit around licking wounds. She's too busy looking for the next big thing. Word was she'd already traded me in, strutting around town with some new guy like I'd never existed. Didn't sting as much as I thought it would. Maybe I was too tired to care, or maybe I'd already seen her for what she was. Either way, she was out there chasing her upgrade, and I was here, picking up my own pieces. I got the story in bits from a buddy who'd seen her at some swanky bar downtown. Lydia, all dolled up in one of those dresses I'd probably paid for, hanging off the arm of this guy. Victor, they called him. Sounded like a real showboat. Slicked back hair, tailored suits, rolling up in a Bentley that purred like money. He was loud about it too, buying rounds, flashing a Rolex, talking big about investments and beach houses. Lydia lapped it up, her laugh cutting through the crowd, her eyes locked on him like he was the golden ticket. Margaret was right there with her, crowing to anyone who'd listen. "This is what you deserve, honey. A real man." Guess I was the fake one all along. I could picture it. Margaret sipping martinis, her fake pearls clinking, while Victor spun his web. Heard he'd promised Lydia the moon, trips to Paris, a penthouse, the kind of life she'd always hinted I couldn't give her. She didn't even blink when the bank started calling about the house, or when the repo guy showed up for her car. She just moved on, convinced Victor was her fast track out. But here's the thing. People like that, they're too smooth. I'd seen guys like him on job sites, all talk and no receipts. Something felt off, even from a distance. Guess Lydia didn't care to look too close. Me? I was done looking back. I'd rented a little place, a one-bedroom above a hardware store, nothing fancy, just a bed, a couch, and a coffee maker that groaned like it was dying. Smelled like sawdust and old paint, but it was mine. Threw myself into work, doubling down on the business. Construction's honest. Wood and nails don't lie to you. I'd spend days on site, hammering out decks and framing walls, the rhythm of it steadying me. Nights, I'd pore over bids and invoices, building something I could stand on. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and after everything, that's all I wanted. That's when Clara started showing up more. You remember her, Lydia's friend, the quiet one with the freckles. She'd pop by the office I'd set up in the spare room, a card table covered in blueprints and coffee rings. One day, she knocked, holding a stack of folders. "Thought you could use some order in here," she said, eyeing the mess with that half-smile of hers. I didn't argue. My filing system was a disaster. She stayed an hour, sorting papers, asking about jobs, her hands moving quick but calm. Didn't feel like charity, felt like teamwork. We got to talking, too. Not the shallow stuff, real stuff. She asked about a project I was proud of, a house I'd built from the ground up last year. I told her how it felt, standing there when it was done, knowing every beam was solid because I'd put it there. She listened, nodding, her eyes bright. "That's something, James," she said. "Not many people can say they make things last. No flattery, just truth." Made me sit up a little straighter. I started noticing her more, how she'd hum under her breath while she worked, how she remembered the little things I said. She didn't care about my bank account, just the guy swinging the hammer. That stuck with me. Meanwhile, Lydia's world was all glitter and no glue. My buddy caught a glimpse of Victor one night, outside that same bar, pacing by his car with his phone pressed to his ear. Looked tense, voice low, snapping at whoever was on the line. "I'll handle it. Just give me time," he'd said, then hung up quick when he saw someone watching. Lydia didn't notice. She was too busy posing for pics, her arm looped through his, all smiles. Another time, someone asked Victor about his investments, and he laughed it off, changing the subject fast. Red flags everywhere, waving like banners, but Lydia just kept dancing toward the edge. I didn't dwell on it much. Had my own life to figure out. Clara started coming by regular, sometimes with coffee, sometimes just to chat. One evening, she stayed late, helping me sketch out a bid. The sun was dipping low, painting the room orange through the blinds. She looked up from the table, pencil in hand, and said, "You're good at this, you know. Building stuff. Starting over." Her voice was quiet, but it landed heavy. I met her gaze, saw that warmth again, and felt something click, like a gear sliding into place. By then, Lydia was probably planning her wedding to Victor, Margaret clapping like it was her own victory lap. I didn't know the details, didn't need to. I was too busy hammering nails, stacking plans, letting Clara's laugh fill the gaps. Whatever Victor was hiding, it'd catch up to them eventually. Me? I was done chasing mirages. I'd found something solid, even if I didn't fully see it yet. And for the first time in a long damn time, that felt like enough. You ever watch something fall apart and feel that mix of, "I told you so," and "damn, that's rough"? That's where Lydia landed, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't smirk a little when I heard. Word trickled in slow at first, whispers from mutual friends, a text from a guy who'd seen it go down. Victor, Mr. Bentley and Rolex, wasn't just a fraud. He was a house of cards in a windstorm, and it all came crashing down fast. Turns out his whole life was borrowed. That sleek car? Leased to the hilt, repossessed one morning while Lydia slept in. The mansion he paraded her through? A short-term rental paid up with maxed-out cards until the landlord padlocked the door. Creditors started circling like vultures, phone calls, lawyers, guys in cheap suits banging on doors. Victor played it cool for a while, dodging questions with that slick grin, but the cracks got too big to hide. One night, he packed a bag, slipped out, and left Lydia standing in an empty apartment with nothing but a note. Didn't even have the guts to say it to her face, just scrawled, "You're not worth the upkeep," and bolted. Cold, right? But fitting. Margaret's house went down too. I'd stopped the mortgage payments weeks back, and the bank didn't mess around. Foreclosure notices piled up, then the sheriff showed up with an eviction crew. She lost it, screaming at Lydia, blaming her for chasing off the only steady thing we had. Meaning me, I guess. Funny how I went from temporary to steady once the check stopped. They were scrambling now, Lydia selling her designer stash online, those purses and heels I'd bankrolled, while crashing on friends' couches. Margaret tagged along, whining nonstop, her big, gaudy life shrunk to a suitcase and a garage. Me? I was on a different track. While Lydia's world burned, mine was starting to glow. Work kept me sane, long days on site, the smell of fresh-cut lumber grounding me. But it was Clara who made it more than just getting by. She'd been around steady now, popping into the office with coffee or a dry joke about my handwriting. We'd fallen into this rhythm. Easy, no pressure, like she'd always been there. One night, we stayed late, sprawled across my card table with takeout boxes and a half-finished bid. The room was dim, just a lamp buzzing in the corner, and we got quiet, the kind of quiet that feels full. She looked at me, chopsticks paused midair, and said, "You know, I always saw it." I raised an eyebrow, wiping soy sauce off my chin. "Saw what?" She set the sticks down, her voice low but sure. "You. The way you kept going, working, giving, even when they didn't deserve it." Lydia never got that. But I did. Her eyes held mine, steady, and it hit me like a brick. Someone had been paying attention, not to my wallet, but to me. My throat tightened, but I just nodded, letting it sink in. After that, things shifted. We weren't just friends anymore. Couldn't be. I'd catch myself watching her, the way she tucked her hair back or laughed at my dumb quips. She'd linger too, her hand brushing mine when we passed tools or papers. It wasn't fireworks. It was quieter, deeper, like a fire you don't notice till it's warming you through. One evening, we were on the porch of my new place, a rental still, but mine. The sky was all pink and gold, crickets chirping loud. I'd been turning it over in my head for days, and it just spilled out. "Clara," I said, my voice rougher than I meant it. "I'm not good with fancy words. Never have been. But you're the best thing I've got going. Marry me." I didn't have a ring, just my hands in my pockets and a heart hammering like I'd run a mile. She blinked, then laughed. Not mean, just surprised, and said, "James, you're an idiot if you think I'd say no." She stepped close, her arms slipping around me, and I hugged her tight, feeling her heartbeat against mine. Simple, real ours. We started building from there. Planning a small wedding, nothing flashy, just us and a few friends. I'd work days, come home to her sketching table settings or humming some tune, and it felt right. Meanwhile, Lydia was out there scraping by. Heard she'd sold her last bag, some Gucci thing, for $50 online, pocket change compared to what it cost me. She'd bounce from couch to couch, friends getting tired of her sob stories. Margaret trailed her like a shadow, muttering about what could have been. The gap between us wasn't just wide now, it was a canyon. I didn't gloat, not out loud. But yeah, part of me enjoyed it. Knowing Lydia's upgrade left her with less than she'd had with me. Victor's parting shot echoed her own words back at her, and that felt like justice. Me and Clara, though, we weren't about settling scores. We were about mornings with coffee, nights planning a life, her hand in mine. Lydia could chase her mirages all she wanted. I'd found something solid, and I wasn't letting go. Life's got a way of turning the tables, doesn't it? A few months after Clara said yes, I started hearing the rumors. Lydia was down bad. Real bad. She'd burned through her friends' goodwill, couch surfing till nobody'd take her calls. Margaret was still glued to her side, though, the two of them clawing at each other like cats in a sack. Last I heard, they'd hit the bottom rung. Lydia was slinging junk at some flea market out by the highway. Fake gold chains, chipped beads, the kind of stuff you'd find in a gas station bargain bin. Funny how fast her high life turned into a pile of knockoffs. I didn't go looking for her. Didn't need to. Me and Clara were busy living, planning our wedding, fixing up the rental, keeping the business humming. But one Saturday, Clara got this itch to check out the market. "Let's find something quirky," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Maybe a little gift for the house." I wasn't big on shopping, but her grin's contagious, so I grabbed my keys and we headed out. The sun was high, air thick with dust and fryer grease, stalls crammed with everything from rusty tools to tie-dye shirts. It was loud, chaotic, alive, folks haggling, kids running wild. Felt good to be there with her. Just us, no weight on my shoulders. Clara's got this way of finding meaning in the smallest things. She stopped at a booth run by an old guy with a beard like Santa, his table covered in handmade stuff, wood carvings, little trinkets. She picked up a tiny brass bird, no bigger than a quarter, its wings spread like it was about to take off. "Look at this, James," she said, holding it up, her voice soft. "Reminds me of us, starting fresh, flying free." I laughed, couldn't help it. "You're a sap," I teased, but I dug out my wallet and handed the guy a 10. He nodded, slipped the bird into a paper bag, and Clara tucked it against her chest like it was gold. I slung an arm around her, feeling lighter than I had in years. That's when I saw her, Lydia. Didn't clock her right away. She was just another figure in the crowd till we passed her stall. She looked rough, hair tied back messy, face drawn, a faded tank top hanging off her frame. Her table was a sad little setup. Plastic bins of gaudy jewelry, fake chains glinting cheap in the sun, beads cracked and dull. Margaret hovered behind her, arms crossed, muttering something sharp. Lydia snapped back, her voice hoarse. "I'm trying, Mum, back off." and tossed a necklace onto the pile. It was a parody of everything she'd chased, all that flash reduced to dollar store trash. Then her eyes flicked up and locked on mine. Time did this weird stutter. Everything else faded, the market noise dropping to a hum. She froze, a cheap bracelet dangling from her fingers, her mouth half open like she'd forgotten how to breathe. I didn't mean to stare, but there we were, caught in this split-second showdown. Clara didn't notice, too busy chatting about where we'd put the bird, her hand warm in mine. Lydia's gaze darted to her, then back to me, saw the easy way we moved together, the smile I couldn't hide. That bracelet slipped from her hand, hit the table with a soft clink, and she didn't even blink. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. I turned away, steered Clara toward the next row, her laugh pulling me back to the moment. We kept walking, past the kettle corn stand, the guy hawking old vinyls, leaving Lydia behind like a shadow I'd outrun. But I felt it, that sting of irony cutting deep. Her, surrounded by junk she couldn't sell, while me and Clara had something real, something small but ours. She'd bet on the wrong horse, and there she was, stuck in the dust while we moved on. Later that night, I heard the rest. A friend of a friend called, said Lydia lost it after we left. Collapsed behind her stall, sobbing into her hands, Margaret yelling at her to pull it together. She'd sat there, staring at that pile of trinkets, and it hit her, what she'd thrown away. Guess the sight of us cracked something open, let all that regret pour out. By Monday, she'd tracked down someone we both knew, begged them to get a message to me. "Can we talk?" she'd said, voice shaky. I made a mistake. The guy texted me, relaying it word for word, waiting for my take. I read it sitting on the couch, Clara dozing against my shoulder, the TV flickering low. That brass bird sat on the coffee table, catching the light. "Can we talk?" 3 years of me talking, trying, pleading, giving, and she'd laughed it off. Now she wanted my ear? I set the phone down, didn't type a thing. Let it buzz once more, then silenced it. She'd made her bed, piled it high with fake gold and empty promises. I wasn't digging her out. Clara stirred, mumbled something sleepy, and I kissed the top of her head. Lydia could cry all she wanted. Her tears didn't change the score. She'd peddled her junk, and I'd found my treasure. That's how it ended. Her breaking, me building, and a market stall between us like a line in the sand. Hard to believe it's been a year since that night I walked out. Feels like a lifetime, but the good kind. Me and Clara tied the knot a few months back. Nothing big, just a handful of folks on a friend's back lawn, wildflowers in her hair, me in a clean shirt trying not to trip over my vows. We didn't need a circus, we just needed us. Now we're settled in a little place of our own, a fixer-upper I bought cheap, with a porch that creaks just right. Business is good too, steady jobs rolling in, my crew humming along. It's not flashy, but it's mine, built on my terms, no one else's. Tonight's one of those evenings where everything feels still. I'm out on the porch, feet up on the railing, a beer sweating in my hand. Clara's next to me, curled in a chair with a blanket, her head tipped back watching the sunset. The sky's all streaked with pink and orange, fading slow, and the crickets are starting their chorus. She's humming some old song, off-key but sweet, and I catch myself smiling. Just a little one, the kind that sneaks up on you. That brass bird from the market sits on the ledge, weathered now, but still ours. We don't say much, don't need to. This is it. Peace, the real stuff. Not the kind you chase, but the kind you find when you stop running. I heard about Lydia a few days back, through the same old rumor mill. She's still out there at that flea market, still peddling her junk. Picture this. Her stall's a beat-up folding table, sagging under the weight of those fake chains and chipped beads. She's packing it up, end of another long day, stuffing unsold trinkets into a battered cardboard box. They clink together, a dull little song of nothing going nowhere. Margaret's there too, hovering like a ghost that won't quit, her voice cutting through the air, bitter and sharp. "If you just held on to him, we wouldn't be here," she's saying, over and over, like it's Lydia's fault the world turned on them. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Doesn't matter anymore. Lydia's different now, haggard, worn thin, her hands rough from hauling that box day after day. She's staring at her phone, cracked screen glowing faint in the dusk. My name's still in there, I bet, tied to that message she sent months ago. Can we talk? I never answered, and she's still waiting, like silence is a sound she can't shake. She sets the phone down, slow, and her shoulders slump, like she's carrying more than just that box, like regrets a weight she can't unload. Margaret keeps droning, but Lydia's not really listening. She's somewhere else, stuck in a loop of what-ifs that'll never play out. Me? I'm right here, and I'm good. Business picked up after I landed a couple big contracts, decks, additions, solid work that pays the bills and then some. I've got a crew I trust, guys who show up and get it done, no egos, no games. Clara's part of it too, in her way, keeps the books straight, cracks jokes about my terrible math. We're not rich, not even close, but we're steady. That's more than I ever got from Lydia's glitter and gone days. I look at Clara now, her face soft in the fading light, and I know I picked right. She's not temporary, she's the long haul, the kind of woman who sees you through. Lydia's story's done, far as I'm concerned. She'll pack that box tomorrow, same as today, Margaret nagging in the background, her phone staying dark. She bet on beauty, on wealth, on some slick-talking mirage, and it left her with nothing but echoes. I saw her that day at the market, saw the moment it hit her, that necklace slipping through her fingers. Didn't need to say a word, her eyes said it all. She'd lost, and I'd won, not because I set out to beat her, but because I stopped playing her game. I take a sip of my beer, the bottle cool against my lips, and Clara reaches over, her hand finding mine. It's rough from work, hers soft but strong, and our fingers laced together easy. The sun dips below the trees, leaving just a glow, and I think about it, how life shakes out. Beauty fades fast, wealth slips through your hands like sand, but respect? Loyalty? That's the stuff that sticks, the stuff that holds you up when the rest falls away. Lydia never got that. I did, late but sure, and it brought me here to a porch, a sunset, a woman who knows my worth. So yeah, this is me signing off. Lydia's out there, chasing ghosts in a cracked screen. I'm right where I belong, watching the day end with the one who stayed. That's the reckoning, not loud, not cruel, just true. And for once, I'm the one still standing. And that's it, folks, my story, from the mess to the quiet I've got now. If you liked hearing how it all shook out, hit that like button and subscribe. I've got more tales where this came from, and I'd love for you to stick around. Drop a comment too. Tell me what you think about Lydia's fall or Clara's win. Let's keep this going. Catch you in the next one. See you soon.